I quit the Labour Party in 2019 after Bill Shorten lost the election, and I still feel upset about it. I've never felt so angry and sad about leaving an organisation. I've never felt so angry about my experience inside any organisation. I've never felt so sad about leaving any other group of people. I've had to leave music groups and felt sad about that. You leave your classmates after high school, and I've had classes at university, workplaces. I've never felt so sad about leaving any job or group of people. And I've never felt so angry about my experience while I was participating in that organization or group. And I still feel upset about it when I think about it. It was 2019, so that was a long time ago now. That was when I quit. I was only in the party for about a year. So I joined in 2018, I think. So that was 8 years ago that I joined, 7 years ago that I quit. And I'm sad about it because I feel like we really do need, ideally, a united party against those that would do our country harm, against those who have too much power, too much wealth, and who abuse that power and that wealth. Right? That is what the Labour Party should be about. And it should be about bringing in everyone who wants to stand up for ordinary Australians against the interests of wealthy individuals with too much power. But the party does not really try to appeal to the majority of Australians in terms of actually getting them to be involved more than just voting. And it didn't seem to care or want me as a member. It didn't seem to care if I stayed as a member. And there's an extreme denial in the Labor Party. I don't know if it's ego or what it is, about the incompetence that exists within the Labor Party when it comes to, especially when it comes to policy. There's a tendency to pre-select people based on their ability to win votes, which in the long run leads to incompetence when it comes to policy, because they're not being pre-selected on the basis of their policy skills. And nobody really cares that much about the policy skills. They care about whether you're a safe pick to win the election. And in the long term, that kind of destroys the party in terms of the competence of the policy making. And there's just this extreme denial about that, extreme unwillingness to... I wanted to help to, how can we improve our systems for developing policy in the party? Because I saw that they were just fundamentally, these are incompetent systems for developing policy. At one point, and I've talked about this example before, the Labor Party in South Australia had a policy to put a tax on electric vehicles, which during a climate crisis, to put a tax on something that's already too expensive, given the climate crisis, given that we want to transition to clean transport as quickly as possible, to put a tax on electric vehicles is just insanely incompetent. They realised that it was a bad idea after they announced it as a policy, because the general public could see it was a bad idea, but somehow they didn't realise that. The way it became policy, I saw it become policy, was it was a Labor event, not even really an official meeting, where Peter Malinauskas was taking questions from the audience, from the crowd, and some big bloke behind me yelled out, "We need to tax the electric vehicles because we're not getting petrol revenue from them, and they don't pay petrol taxes, etc." Which makes sense if you don't think deeply at all about it, if you don't think the climate crisis is real. I don't know, I guess he must have looked working class enough, sounded working class enough, or whatever it was, and they thought, oh, that sounds good, and it quickly became Labor Party policy. But meanwhile, there are plenty of better ideas that I heard other people suggest that immediately got shut down due to whatever reason, ego. There's no rigorous process to determine whether a policy is popular in the general public. You know, how much support and opposition is there in the general public? How much support and opposition is there from experts? And when I raised this and said we need to develop better systems for developing policy, that are actually data driven, based on data about the level of support and opposition, both in the general public and in a community of experts, there was this complete lack of interest in that, because they seem to think that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the way that policy is developed in the Labor Party, a kind of ad hoc way that they come up with policies. The politicians come up with policies in a very ad hoc way, and then the rest of the party kind of justify and assume that there's this like really rigorous process behind it, even though I could see directly with my eyes that there is no rigorous process here. It's a very incompetent way of developing policy. And so that was, I guess, the most fundamental reason that I quit, because it wasn't just the incompetence, but the refusal to acknowledge that there was anything wrong with the way that they developed policy. A complete lack of interest in recognizing that, you know, the Labor Party not moving fast enough in improving their competence. It's okay to be incompetent, but you need systems to improve that, and they have no interest in doing that, because they would rather just defend everything that Labor Party does, because they're so stuck in a campaign mindset of just trying to win votes and thinking that the way to do that is just to sell whatever policies they currently have, and to rather than to think critically about those policies and improve the policies, they just want to defend the current policies and the current policy decisions of their politicians. And I guess maybe there's a lot of careerism. There's probably a lot of ego involved. There's probably a lot of careerism involved, of people in the party wanting to suck up to other politicians so they can become politicians. So they don't want to rock the boat by criticizing and that kind of thing. There is also, you know, fear. They think on certain things, if we do that, you know, we'll lose the swing voters or whatever. For some things that makes sense. If there's data showing, you know, you'd lose more votes than you'd gain from a certain kind of lefty idea, but they kind of assume that's the case when there's no data supporting it. And they also avoid things that would gain them votes from swing voters, and where there's no excuse. And some people are just jerks as well. Like, there were a shocking number of jerks. I've never been in any organization or class or sport team or whatever, where there were so many people who were jerks just for no apparent reason. People who didn't know me yet. Sometimes they were jerks because they didn't like the ideas I was suggesting, but sometimes they were jerks immediately before they'd heard me speak at all. It was just shocking how many people had these egos, and it just made it a really unpleasant experience. Like, I'm quite a sensitive person. Maybe I don't look like a sensitive person, but I'm quite sensitive, and I was quite miserable in the Labor Party. I'm not normally a miserable person, but in the Labor Party, I was really miserable because there were people who were jerks and there were people who just weren't interested. And then, you know, the way that meetings are run is incompetent, because either some of the meetings will be like way too long because they'll just let people complain and not focus on the right things. Other meetings will be really short because they rush everything through without properly discussing it. So the internal processes are completely broken and incompetent, and there's a refusal to acknowledge that and address it and try to fix it. They just assume that there's nothing fundamentally broken in the way that the party works, when there is. And it became just too depressing to be in the party, and I'm sad about it, because part of me regrets quitting, because if I'd stayed in by now, 8 years later, maybe I could have done some good, right? But I just couldn't handle it. I just couldn't handle how depressing it was. The combination of people being jerks with people just being indifferent. I couldn't handle it anymore. And I gave up on the Labor Party being able to really I gave up on me being able to do anything positive within the Labor Party. which may have been wrong. I probably could have done something positive if I'd stayed in and kept working, but I just couldn't because it felt too depressing. It felt too painful. It felt too lonely. I was 30, not a lot of people at that age. In the South Australian Labor Party, almost nobody my age. But then people close to my age sometimes, well, people of all ages were sometimes jerks to me. There are enough people being jerks to me and just indifferent, that it was just a really lonely experience, really upsetting experience, and some of it made me angry in some of the attitudes. Sometimes the way I was treated made me quite angry in retrospect. Like, I feel angry about it now, even to this day, when I think about it, because, it's just a disaster what's happening in Australia and around the world. Quality of life, environmental crises, violence, and all these things that the Labor Party just aren't moving fast enough on. And it's not just like, oh, you need to be more progressive. They need to be more competent as well. If they were more competent, they could be more progressive and still get elected. That means also recognizing that, conservatives aren't always wrong. Maybe sometimes they're right about some things. You got to pick your battles. You got to be pragmatic. I'm not coming at this purely from like a Greens left perspective, of they just need to be more leftist and more progressive. They also need to pick their battles better. In some cases, they need to be more pragmatic. And so there's a general incompetence that then limits how many progressive things they can do. They can't be as progressive because because of that incompetence. And at the time, they weren't even competent enough to win elections, because they lost that election in 2019, and that was pretty depressing too. And now they're competent enough to win, maybe. At least they have been the last couple of elections, but they're barely competent enough to win, and that then becomes an excuse to not do all kinds of other things they should be doing to help people with cost of living, quality of life, to address environmental crises and global crises, local crises. It becomes an excuse not to take more action, even when some of those things would actually win them votes from swing voters. It's sad. And I kind of, now I'm 30. I already felt old because I was too old for Young Labor. But there weren't many people in my age group. Now I'm 38, and it is sad because maybe I could have done some more if I'd stayed in the party, but I just couldn't handle it. I just wasn't strong enough, I guess, to handle it. I just felt so lonely. So yeah, that's why I quit the Labor Party.